Welcome back to Educator.com's Advanced English Grammar course. This lesson is on the proper use of Latin terms and abbreviations. Let's get started. Okay, to begin with, why does English use so many Latin terms and abbreviations? Well, that's because for hundreds, if not thousands of years, Latin was the language of international literacy, scientific exchange. It was the language that you thought in and wrote your thoughts down in. You might talk to your neighbors in whatever your local language was, but if you wanted to talk to other academics, you pretty much had to speak, read, and write Latin. That means that we've actually inherited a whole bunch of Latin terms, including a special set of Latin terms and abbreviations that we use for things that we don't really have concise terms for in English. And this is how to use them correctly. So we're going to start with the big three, etc., e.g., and i.e. Then we're going to look at when to use i.e. and when to use e.g., because people get them mixed up all the time. And then we're going to go over a few other helpful Latin terms, sic, circa, et al., vis, and versus. And then, of course, we'll end with some practice. Alright, etc. or etc. Etc. means and others, or and the rest. The et means and. Etc. is used at the end of a list to indicate that there are other similar items on the list too numerous to mention here. So, for example, I enjoy various kinds of sewing, quilting, tailoring, etc. Now, obviously, there are many kinds of sewing that are not quilting and tailoring. I'm just letting you know that there's a whole bunch of them, and you can just fill in the rest of the list in your head. That's what etc. means. Use a comma before etc. at the end of a list, just because it's at the end of a list and the Oxford comma still works before etc. Never use etc. more than once in a row. So never say etc., etc., etc. For one thing, you'll sound like Yul Brynner from The King and I, and nobody wants that. Also, it's sort of redundant to say, and all the rest, and all the rest, and all the rest. You sound like you've gotten stuck and you're repeating yourself. Don't do that. And never use and before etc. Because the Latin word et means and, when you say and etc., you're actually saying and all the rest, which really makes you sound like there's something stuck in your brain. Finally, when using etc., make sure all the items in the list are of the same kind, whatever kind that is. So, if I'm making a list of kinds of sewing, you better make sure that all the words in the list before etc. and all the ones I don't mention and use etc. to replace are kinds of sewing. So that's just something for you to keep in mind when you use etc. Alright. E.g., also known as exempli gratia. That's the only time you'll hear that phrase spoken today. Exempli gratia means for the sake of example, but for your purposes, just remember that e.g., which is what we actually use in written English, it means the same thing as for example. So, the bakery sells many kinds of cake, e.g., chocolate, carrot, and spice. Notice you don't need the comma. Now we come to i.e., which means id est. Id est literally means that is. It means you're restating your idea. Just remember that i.e. might as well stand for in effect. Only use i.e. for equivalent things. So, I love a store that sells baked goods, i.e. a bakery. A store that sells baked goods pretty much has to be a bakery, so we're setting up an equivalency between these two terms so we can use i.e.